All right. Welcome back to Reinvented, guys. And today I have Paul. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I own Savage Creative Solutions, which is a full service integrated digital agency headquartered here in Shreveport, Louisiana. And we serve clients um, with services for their marketing, advertising, and public relation needs across a variety of industries.
And would you kind of like to elaborate more on, I guess, like how you help market?
Yeah. So basically, we handle a variety of different areas. So it could be everything from social media management, web design and graphic design, digital advertising like Google ads or social media ads. And we help businesses find who their target audience is and reach that target audience and reach them at the right time to increase their revenues and increase their sales.
And how would like you help maybe a business find that find their customer?
Yeah, so we're a very data-driven agency, so that's something that we really take a look at is the data and the insights and make sure that number one, they have those sources set up so that they can tell who their target audience is. So one of the first things we do is take a look at any of the data and insights that they have from their social media platforms or Google Analytics, or if those aren't set up, then we help them get those set up so that we can start collecting that data and learning who they really should be targeting because a lot of times that's not who they think it is.
And what's like one thing you feel like people like kind of misunderstand about, I guess, like looking at the data and helping businesses find their target audience?
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest misconception is that you've got to look at the data with a grain of salt as well. Because, for example, you could have a ton of people looking at your social media or a ton of followers on your social media accounts. But if that's not your target audience, then you're basically preaching to the choir every time you put your message or your product out there. Um, so making sure that you're looking at not just the data, but the data that's making you sales and money.
And kind of like how would you, I guess, have someone like maybe like a business owner look at like kind of what's making them money and maybe not what their not target audience is saying? Probably
Yeah.
a better way to phrase that, but
So the the suggestion or recommendation that I would have there is making sure that everything's tied together, so that you can track if they're coming from social media and making a sale or purchasing something on your website, or if you've sent an email that's redirecting them to come and buy something. And so not just looking at your audience, but the audience that is making the sales and where that is coming from. And you can do that by making sure that all of those data points tie together.
and if you don't mind me asking, what are some like I guess pinpoint numbers you're looking at just from like maybe the business side of things?
Yeah, so the main numbers that we kind of look at are their ad spend, how much they're spending, the revenue that they're kind of making or the average revenue that they're making per sale, and then what that return on that ad spend looks like. So ideally, we would like them to be making at least 25% more off of each sale than what they're spending. And so that is one of the main metrics that we look at is to make sure that you're making a good return on the money that you're spending.
And how would like you, I guess, make sure like that they're making that like that they're hitting that return?
Yeah, so it can vary per platform, but for instance, on Google advertising, a lot of times those are by keyword searches, and the amount that you pay for different keywords varies based on the keyword and kind of the competition for that keyword. So we take a look at what keywords are driving revenue and how much they're making for that keyword. And for instance, we may turn off certain keywords that have a really high cost per click, but aren't meeting kind of that average sales goal that they're looking for and just isn't giving the best return back. And in doing that, we're then saying shift that budget to these keywords instead, where you're getting more per sale and paying less for them to click and go there.
And also, like, what made you kind of want to go into like, I guess, data science in a sense?
Yeah. So I kind of got into this field through MySpace was really big when I was younger, kind of the prelude to Facebook and modern social media. And you could really customize your profiles with the code and all of those different layouts that they would allow you to do on MySpace back in the day. And so that kind of piqued my interest in coding. And I just decided pretty much back then at that point that I wanted to make a career out of it, and that's what I wanted to do. So that kind of got me into the field, and then every position that I've had there since has just kind of added to my knowledge and experience that I've gained to allow me to now run a full-time agency that helps businesses and organizations.
And when did you like, I guess, when did you start your own agency?
So I started it in 2000, around 2013, 2014. I graduated from college in 2015 and started it shortly before graduating as kind of like a means as an online portfolio to be able to show the work and the services that I could offer and the experience that I had in hopes that I could find a quote big boy job, if you will. And ever since then, it's kind of remained a side hustle up until about 2.5 years ago when I went full time with the agency then.
Was it always your goal to go like full time at
It
like some point, I guess?
Yeah, the goal kind of from the beginning was to always have my own agency full time. But I knew that that wasn't probably going to happen in the very beginning. And there were even several times, I think there were like 2 to 3 times kind of in between other career paths that I attempted to do Savage Creative Solutions full time, and it didn't work. The clients weren't there. My knowledge wasn't what it should have been at the time, and there's just so many variables that it really took about that third or fourth time of me trying to go full time to actually make it happen. And so now, like I mentioned, we've been about 2 years full time.
And when did I guess when did you start to kind of realize like the clients were there and that you're like, okay, maybe I can try again?
Yeah, so it kind of came from the career path that I ended up going down. So I started out my career at KSLA News 12, one of the TV stations and news stations here in Shreveport, on the digital sales side. So when you kind of visit a news website and you see the ads or the ads that pop up on their apps and that sort of thing, I was in charge of putting those clients into the system. And so that really gave me an insight into kind of digital advertising and even got to go to the marketing and news side to kind of fill in for my boss at the time. And that's when I realized I really loved the marketing side a little bit more than the sales side. But by being there, I learned how to negotiate media buys for TV, a lot about the digital advertising side of things and products in that service. And right before I left there, or as I was leaving there, is when I got recommended one of my first clients, and so that kind of helped jumpstart the client side a little bit. Um, and then one of the account executives there, led me to an agency that I ended up working for shortly thereafter. And being a smaller agency of about 4 people, counting the owners, I was able to be really hands-on and really learn how to run an agency and what that looked like, not just having clients, but also the invoicing and the markup and everything that comes along with running that side of the business. And so I really kind of got to grow during that period. And I always made it a stipulation or let them know up front when I took on a new career path that I do have these clients and I would like to keep them on board. And there were a couple of times where I wasn't allowed to grow the agency or have any new clients come on board, but I always made sure that I didn't have to get rid of any that I had, and I could always continue to maintain them. And so through each career step, I kind of built on that a little bit more, all the way up until my last position before going full time, which was Director of Marketing, Communications, and Public Relations for the Greater Shreveport Chamber of Commerce. So while I was there, I was in charge of those 3 areas for the chamber, our 1,500 plus members, as well as many of our partners. And so that really gave me the opportunity then to deep dive and connect with business owners in our community and even some legislators and community leaders to learn what their pain points were and what they really needed help with as far as their marketing and advertising went. And it was really that last kind of career path and everything that built up to it that then allowed me to hold a ribbon cutting, kind of announcing my business to all of those business owners that I had worked with for the past couple of years. Um, and that kind of allowed me to have that base to really make it this time when I did it and make it a sustainable thing. Because that was kind of the biggest problem before. As an entrepreneur, you never know when your check is going to be or how much it's going to be. There's no such thing as getting paid on the 1st and the 15th. So one month you might make 20,000 and the next month you might make 1,000. So you've got to kind of take that into mind when you're planning those things. But it was really kind of every step of that career journey that led me to that point.
And what do you think, like, I think maybe your biggest lesson was when taking that step into like the business side?
It, it was probably jumping in too soon. I wanted it so bad that I tried it multiple times, even when I didn't have the necessary processes and things in place that I really should have known looking back needed to be there. But I didn't think about at the time just because I was so eager to get out and live my dream, if you will. I know that sounds cliche. Um, and so the biggest thing looking back would probably be taking the time and being patient and understanding that everything happened for a reason. Every step of the way led me to where I am, and that's ultimately what allowed me to be successful versus kind of pushing ahead and not following through with all of those steps.
And I guess like did it kind of teach you like maybe at the end of the day what like maybe what you needed to work on?
Yeah, it absolutely did. And then in February of 2020, this was after I'd been at the chamber for about a year, is when, COVID hit and everything was going on with that. But it was also when I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And so I was furloughed from my job at the time and was able to focus on my health. But through that diagnosis, it also gave me a push and a perseverance that I didn't have before. So you gain a greater appreciation for life. You realize that there's no time like the present, and honestly, it gave me a greater drive than I had any other times that I had before. And so I think that was a great motivator and the success of this last time as well.
And do you feel like getting diagnosis kind of helps kind of like like kind of I guess like a makeshift in maybe like mindset like going towards I guess opening and running your own.
Yeah, absolutely. It completely changes your mindset um, when you have an uncertainty thrown into your life or don't even know. I mean, a lot of times, and I'm sure many others are like me too, you'll look at something that you need to do or think about something that you need to do, and you're like, "Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow," or that can wait until tomorrow. But when you have something come into your life when you don't know if tomorrow will be there, then that really gives you the push and the motivation that you need to kind of get things done and get them and getting things done is ultimately what led to me being able to go full time. So I guess it was that motivation that gave me that extra push.
And I forgot what my question was. Uh, it's gonna come back to me. It's gonna come back to me. I
Yeah.
will. Like, what do you when it does come back to me? What do you think maybe your biggest failure was, and what did you learn from it?
So I would probably say That's a good question.
It doesn't even have to be a failure, but like maybe something that people might classify as one, and maybe you don't see it as a failure, maybe like a growing
I guess
opportunity.
that was my first thought was I don't necessarily see anything as a failure, but rather a lesson of something that I've learned. Um, and the biggest lesson would probably be following following what my passion was. So I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to own an agency. I was creative and I wanted to be in that kind of creative mindset. Um, but I started out my career at a TV station on the sales side. And so while it was great and the contacts ultimately ended up working out, um, I wasn't happiest while I was working there. Sales wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't get to have the creativity that was really fulfilling to me. Um, and so as far as failure goes, I wouldn't necessarily count it as a failure. It was a lesson in learning something that I didn't want to handle or didn't want to do. But I also think that's a great point for people who are just starting out in their careers is make sure that you're following your passion, number one, but also understanding that sometimes there's a windy road to that passion. And so while I spent about a year not doing what I wanted to do, I did gain about a lot of valuable insights in that place, and it was ultimately the connections and networks that I made there that led me to where I am. So in that respect, it wasn't a failure, but it definitely was one of the pain points along the way, if you will.
And what like made you, I guess, like maybe as like a child, what made you want to do like a creative field?
So I've always kind of been a creative person. That was my outlet and way that I kind of expressed myself. So that was definitely one of the driving forces behind it. But aside from being an entrepreneur myself, I've always been fascinated by other entrepreneurs and kind of their past and the way that they've created something or put something out into the world that can completely change the world, and it was built in a garage. And so I have a special place in my heart for small business owners, and that was probably my second biggest driving force was really wanting to be in a fulfilling field where I could help those who are trying to start their own businesses as well. When we're younger, or when I was younger at least, a lot of times I was taught that in order to help people, you had to be a doctor or an attorney or something like that. And through my career and what I've been able to do, I found that that's not necessarily the case. I've been an agency owner and have been able to help people build their businesses, and they've trusted me with sometimes their life savings to do that, which I don't take lightly. And so that's made it a really fulfilling career path that I wasn't necessarily expecting when I first started out, but hoped and wanted.
And like maybe when you were younger, you said like, growing up you had people or you were always told like the only way you could help people was like, doctors, nurses. Was that like, I guess maybe a constant thing as a child, or was it just kind of like maybe a one person said and done?
I don't know that it was constant, but it was definitely said by multiple people, and I don't think they meant it in necessarily a derogatory way, but if when you're a child and it's like, "What do you wanna do?" and you say, "Well, I wanna help people," the immediate reaction you get is, "Oh, well, you should be a doctor, or you should be a nurse, or you should be an attorney." It wasn't necessarily the career and creativity that I loved that they felt was gonna be beneficial or helping people when it came to that sense.
And when I guess maybe if someone had like said that to you now, like you can't help people, what would you say to them?
Yeah, so I would say that there are people who have the same drive and passion that I have for businesses around the world. I mean, Facebook started out in a small house in California and is now one of the biggest social media platforms in the world and is changing areas of our society that we never thought it would change. And it's businesses like that that I have the opportunity to work with. I work with those people who are in the garages building new technology and building new businesses that can change the world. Um, and in many cases, change the world for the better. And so I think the idea that the only way we can help people in the traditional sense, in the medical field or the attorney field, um, quite frankly, wasn't correct. And I've proven that's true by helping um, not only change the world with technology, but also allow business owners to change their lives. They've gone from barely being able to afford to start their business to fully sustaining their family and their sons and daughters on something that they love. And I think that's one of the most fulfilling things that I've seen come out of the work that I do.
And like also if someone was able to tell you that, would you be able to, I guess, kind of give them reason as to why it's helpful?
Why? What's helpful? I'm sorry.
Like, my brain is not working today. Um, let's see if I can phrase this better. Would like if someone, I guess, like in the like from the last question, if someone were to say like you're not being helpful to anyone, would you kind of be able to kind of, I guess, give reason, like say, look at so and so that I helped, and I guess kind of give them that reason?
Yeah. So if they're, I mean, kind of like I mentioned before, they can go from spending a couple of thousand in savings to running a business full time, where not only they're able to provide for their family, but they also have the flexibility and freedom to work their own schedule too. So I've had people go from starting a new business and barely making it to making hundreds of thousands a year and being able to take that Friday off and go to a soccer game for their kid or go to karate practice, um, and just be more invested in their family as well and have that financial freedom to be able to do so. And so I think that's one of the main ways that we're able to help people is to help grow their business and give them the financial freedom to to make the decisions that they want to do. And even for myself, that's what I spoke to a high school last week, and of course, one of the kids said, "Well, you're rich, or are you rich?" And my response was, "Well, financially, am I rich? No, I'm not making hundreds of thousands of dollars myself. But my parents are older in age and sometimes need some additional help, or sometimes my nieces and nephews have football games and things like that. While I'm not making that money, I have the ability to go to those games, or if a parent calls to go and help them with something that they may need help with. Um, and so, in that sense, that's wealth for me, is being able to make those decisions and not feel guilty about it.
And I kind of, I guess, piggybacking off that, like do you feel like it's a common, like, I guess, misconception that if you run your own business, you must be like financially stable and like that you have it all together?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of lost sometimes in the fact that when you are self-employed, you don't have a consistent paycheck. Um, and you don't necessarily have health insurance, for instance, and some of those insurances, because that's all paid through an employer. So that is extra cost that you've got to pay in that sense too. So I think sometimes people think of entrepreneurship in the grandiose sense of, oh, you're making a lot of money and you can do whatever you want. Um, but it's actually quite the opposite. You've got to have a lot more boundaries to set work-life balance because you're working in, I mean, this office is in my home, and how do I separate when I'm working from when I'm not? Um, and having those boundaries in place is what helps you make become more successful too, because you can only, as much as we would love to, we can only work so much before your body's going to tell you no. And I've experienced that a couple of times. When you're an entrepreneur, you have that hustle drive, that yes attitude, because you don't know when the next paycheck's coming. And so that's one thing that I've really learned within the past couple of years, particularly after going full time, is you do have to have boundaries in the work that you do too, regardless of the income or the clientele that you have.
And I guess like what is something trying to think how to phrase this. What like how would you do your like work life balance? Like examples from I guess your life.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've done um, is consolidate the lines of communication that we have. So there's so many lines of communication nowadays that things can get lost, or you spend more time than you need to trying to handle that. You'll receive a Facebook Messenger message, a text, an email, a DM on Instagram. And so one of the things that I've done is really encourage clients to solely use email so that we can keep everything in one place and I only have one place to check. Um, I've been more strict about the hours that we have. We're Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, Saturday by appointment only. And if it's outside of those hours, then it'll be handled the following day. And that's something that was really dragging me down was if I got an email at 8 o'clock, then I would pull my laptop out and respond to the email at 8 o'clock. Um, and I've learned that at that point, there's not much that you're going to be able to do that night that would change anything versus doing it the following day, other than I'm exhausted the following day. So making sure that we really kind of stick to the hours that we set, and and honestly, I think that's helped improve my productivity during those hours because I'm really focused for a sole period of time and then not when I can relax. Where previously I was kind of half focused for 24 hours a day, and it was just draining.
I like coming from my experience here, but do you did you ever have I guess like people getting mad that when you would like kind of I guess consolidate your hours of like I'm only answering emails from like 8 to 5 or something. Did you have like people I guess kind of getting mad at you saying like no it since you're a business owner you should be on 24/7. Like your mind should always be on.
And I have had a little bit of pushback from a couple of times, but most clients are really understanding. And the best way I can put it to them is your business isn't open 24/7. Um, so setting that expectation up front and being realistic about the fact that you don't work 24/7, so you can't expect me to work 24/7. And even the clients that do work 24/7, like we do have a plumber that, of course, has 24/7 emergency services. There are circumstances that we do kind of cross those boundaries. If a website comes down for a client and we've got to get that client website back up, yeah, I'll work at midnight to get that website back up. But it's just kind of setting those boundaries and expectations that no, if you need an update and you send it at 8 p.m., that'll be handled within the next 24 hours. If your website or something that's costing you money or is an emergency, then yes, absolutely. I will do whatever is necessary to make sure that we get that handled for you and handled quickly. And most of them understand where we're coming from with that, just because they're business owners themselves. And if they're not as good about setting boundaries as we are right now, then they at least understand the need for it and why we are.
And did like also I kind of trying to like think from my experience, did you ever, I guess, have like maybe even like starting out to people kind of, say like, well, that's not how business owners should think, like of setting, I guess, setting hours kind of for themselves?
So I never really had too much pushback on that part. I think the biggest challenge was going from side hustle to full time. Because as a side hustle, of course, I worked a job 8 to 5 and then would come home and work on clients in the evenings, late into the evenings, even on the weekends. And so once we went full time, then that was that was just not possible. I was working all day, then working in the evenings, then working on the weekends. And because that's when they were used to communicating with me for the past several years, because we've had clients that have been with us since 2011, that was a big hurdle to get them to realize that, okay, we are full time now, we are available during the day, and we're not going to be responding to calls and text and messages at all hours of the night or meeting on weekends if we don't have to. And if we do, then it needs to be by appointment only, and just setting those expectations up front. And it took uh, we still have a couple that are still trying to get on board, but it took about that first year, first 2 years for our clients to really kind of understand that we are full time and we're not going to work outside of those hours anymore, and that transition from kind of side hustle to full time, if you will.
And who do you think, like, and this could be anyone in your life, who do you think was your biggest, like, mentor in your life?
So I would probably say my communication professors at my college. Um, so I attended a liberal arts college, which was a little different. I got to take classes in several different things. But a lot of my professors were also business owners themselves. So they weren't just teaching, they were teaching from experience. And by teaching from experience, ultimately became mentors and shaping the way that I went about things and how I started my business. And it was them that kind of set that foundation from the beginning to help guide my career path and lead me to where I am. So I'd probably say my college professors were kind of that biggest mentor for me as I was getting started.
And did they, like, I guess, kind of give you, like, maybe, like, it doesn't have to be intentional, but it has to be unintentional. Did they, like, give you, like, I guess, advice in maybe eventually going full time someday?
Yeah, so there was a little bit of advice given, but I think the biggest thing that they contributed was just being there to bounce ideas off of and say, "Hey, so I was kind of thinking about this," or "What are your thoughts on that?" And having someone who had been in the industry, who had potentially tried those things already, um, was very beneficial in kind of shaping how I went about things myself.
And in your opinion, what do you think the biggest personality trait someone needs to either, like, maybe make that switch or just, I guess, in general?
So you're referring to the switch to full time, correct?
Yeah, or even just like running their own business or like anything that you do.
I would say probably organization and processes are the two biggest things. And I think it's those two things that probably failed the first couple of times that I tried, that led me to not be able to make that shift when I wanted to. But particularly, and it was a almost a big shock to me when I first went full time, is it's almost like when people say they're retiring and then don't know what to do with their life because they have all these hours. It was similar to that, but I had all these hours that I didn't have to report somewhere, even though it was work hours. And you really have to have discipline in place to make sure that you're working when you're supposed to work and you're doing what you're supposed to do, and making sure that you have set processes that you can use for reaching out to clients or onboarding clients. Um, because there isn't a boss there to tell you, okay, get back to work, or should you be taking a 2 hour lunch, or different things like that. So really being realistic with yourself, and saying, okay, I've got to be disciplined, and if I want to be successful, this is what I've got to do, and this is how I'm going to go about doing it.
And I guess how would you like maybe tell someone like this is kind of how I guess you discipline yourself, like making sure you're staying on top of it?
Yeah, so I guess that kind of plays into the processes side of things. So number one, coming up with what your hours are going to be that you work and sticking to those hours. Or It might even be something as simple as like my office is in my home, and how do I separate work and life balance? I don't open my laptop unless I'm in my office, because when I'm in my office, I'm in work mode. That means work. If I step out of my office, then that's just home, and I don't want to conflate the two, because then you very quickly muddle the waters, and you're just stressed to the max, where you feel like you're working 24/7 and you can never leave work. And so just setting some processes in place like that, so that you know what you've got to do, when you've got to do it, and the time frame that you have to do it.
And I guess how would you kind of like tell someone to like discipline themselves? Like what I guess kind of what advice would you give them that maybe from like your own experience of like this is how I did it?
So I think the biggest thing that's been helpful to me is just making sure that something separates when I'm working and when I'm not. So if I'm in my office and open my laptop, I'm working. And that's helped me to cut down on a lot of other things as well. If it's 8 o'clock at night and I can just open my laptop in bed, then I'm more likely to do that. If I start to open it and I'm like, no, you said you're not going to open your laptop unless you're in your office, then you've got to get out of bed, go into the office. You realize it's 8 o'clock. I told people I wasn't going to work at 8 o'clock. So a lot of times your processes will help give you discipline. And so that's why I think those processes are so important in that.
And like what would you tell someone to like how to come up with like processes and how maybe how they want to run things?
So I think it ultimately comes down to what your goals are and how much income you need to bring in. There, in the very beginning, I had business hours, but they weren't 8 to 5. A lot of times it was 8 to 8 or 8 to 10, just because I was working on growing a business and getting my name out there and doing different things like that. Now that we have a more steady clientele and we have a lot more referrals and word of mouth, um, I can set those processes now to actually be 8 to 5 like a normal job, but that may not be the case in the beginning. You've got to know what works for you and know how much work you've got to put in to get what you need, and then you can kind of shift and shape those as you go and kind of grow from there.
And what do you think one common myth about your field is?
So I think the biggest myth is probably on the social media side. Um, I think people conflate personal and business use of social media, and they think, oh, I'm on Facebook, I post every day, I can run my business social media page. And don't really take into account that there's a strategy that goes into that, and just posting isn't necessarily going to get you the sales or the revenue that you're looking for, or that even necessarily anybody can do it. I don't know how many times I've had clients um, come, or potential clients even be interested in social media management, get pricing for it, and be like, dang, that's a lot of money. And it's like, well, there's a lot of hours and a lot of work that goes into that. We plan a strategy, we design the post, and then they go and have Uncle Jimmy or their little niece and nephew who is either barely graduated college or hasn't even graduated college yet, and then come back in a few months and say, well, I'm still not seeing any results. And it comes back to that myth of just because you're on social media, you can run social media, and negating the fact that there's a strategy and you've got to know how that works, and even what data points to look at, to help grow your business or even guide that strategy in the long term.
And like when it comes to like social media, like is it more like when they tell you like, well, that's too much money? Is it more like they just like ask like their like maybe their younger nephew because of like maybe their age?
Yeah, so they think their age. So a lot of careers, the more years in the field you have, the more experience. It seems like with the digital age, people equate age to experience more than actual years in the industry. So they think because they're younger or because we're younger, we're better at it. And in some respects, that's true. Um, but just because you're on TikTok 24/7 doesn't mean you know how to sell on TikTok or set up a TikTok shop and run ads for it. And so I think it's kind of conflating age with experience in some of those respects and trying to not pay for social media when they don't see the value in it. And that's one of those kind of myths and challenges is the value of social media when they're on social media.
Yeah, I know, like, from my experience, like, even just not having to, like, pay for it. Like, I remember starting out, I didn't know a damn thing. So what would you like, I guess, what would you tell someone, like, kind of in that mindset of, like, "Oh, I know what I'm doing," but no, you don't?
So the very first thing I would say is, and I think this is probably the biggest mistake I see new business owners make when starting out, is hitting that invite all button and going to invite their friends and hitting invite all, or asking their family and friends to like their page and getting mad when their family and friends don't. 9 times out of 10, your family and friends are not your target audience. And 9 times out of 10, the majority of the people on your Facebook profile are probably not your target audience. So it goes back to kind of what we were talking about in the beginning. You invite all and you get 1,000 followers on your page, but if none of them are interested in the service that you're offering, then why have them there? And it's not helping you get any money. Um, so I mean, I have clients who run nail shops and different things like that and will invite me to their page, or even friends who invite me to a nail shop page. It's like I have no need for a nail shop page. It's not that I don't support you and don't want you to succeed, but I'm not your target audience. So having one more number on your follower count from me isn't helpful to growing your bottom line.
And do you feel like with, like, not having, like, the number of followers, I guess, doesn't matter kind of to the end result just because everyone has different, like, follower counts, whether it's like TikTok, Instagram, any social media app, just like, do you kind of have to tell people, like, at the end of the day, your follower count isn't exactly the whole, like, deterrent?
Yeah, so ultimately you can have thousands of followers, but if you're not making any money off of them, then it's not helpful. So I tell clients that it's better to look at your revenue and track the revenue you're getting from social media versus the number of followers. I've seen clients or businesses who have come to us who have only 100 or a couple of hundred followers that are just starting out, and they're making more money than people who have a couple of thousand followers on their page. Um, and I kinda use that example to illustrate to them that follower counts don't equal money. So just increasing follower counts doesn't mean you're gonna get more money. And kind of let's refocus and focus on what's important, and that's the revenue that these channels are bringing in, which is the whole reason you're here and posting on them in the first place. Um, it's not necessarily to get 100,000 followers. Would you rather have $100,000 or 100,000 followers? 9 times out of 10, they're gonna say $100,000.
And, like, do you also, I guess, kind of feel like people kind of like look at like trying to maybe up their follower count, but it's like 10,000 people aren't buying your products?
Yeah, and I think we have this false kind of myth in our society that follower counts is equal to success, and then success is equal to money. Um, and so they think that the more followers they have, the more money they're going to make and the more successful they'll be. And so that's one of the things that we kind of have that myth chat about, if you will, from the very beginning, is that more followers does not mean you're going to be more successful or make more money necessarily.
Let's see here. What do you like think maybe an important lesson people need to learn, I guess, on like the social media side of things, maybe to in the end grow?
So one of the biggest things is, particularly with the political divisiveness that is going on right now, being very limited in the political content that you choose to share on either side of the aisle. Um, and basically being Switzerland on social media is very important, particularly if you're a business owner. Because it doesn't matter if you're on the left or on the right, you're essentially alienating 50% of your audience from buying from you, no matter what side you're on. And so that's one of the things that we really try to encourage people to do too is, excuse me, number one, don't post political content on your business page. It's just not beneficial to your sales. It's not related to your story in any way. But number two, also limit it on your personal Facebook as well, because it's quite easy nowadays to find out who runs a business and to see their social media profiles. Um, and I have seen experiences where personal content has affected a business as well. Um, and so that's one of the biggest things that we try to encourage clients from the very beginning is to limit the social political content that you're posting or sharing online. Have whatever views you want, but it doesn't necessarily need to be on Facebook.
Like, do you feel like sometimes, like, if say they posted it on like their personal Facebook, do you feel like maybe they're like kind of driving away customers, like sometimes directly, like when maybe like denying service in a sense?
Yeah, absolutely. As a business owner, basically everybody has a personal brand as well, and your name and your face is your personal brand for your business. And whether you're posting it under the business name or posting it as yourself, it's going to get correlated with your business, and could potentially impact sales. So even I'm careful about what I post on social media. Social media drives a lot of the referrals for my business. And at the end of the day, I'm the face of the company. And so anything that I post, whether it's political or inappropriate or is all going to be linked back to the business that I own.
And like, I guess what would you like kind of tell someone don't like? How would you kind of tell them like logically think before you post?
Yeah. So, number one, if it's political, it probably doesn't need to be shared. Number two, if you question if your parents or your grandparents should see it, or if you wouldn't send it to them directly in a text, then you probably don't need to share it on Facebook either. Um, One of the best pieces of advice I got when I was younger in my career was, I'm sure we're all familiar with kind of the on this day or memory feature that's available within Facebook. Every day that that pops up, just kind of take a look and delete anything that's inappropriate or that you wouldn't want your parents or your grandparents to see or that you wouldn't send to them. And by the time you've done that 365 days, you've cleaned up your entire social media profile. And it's also a good way to just kind of stay aware of what's being seen or visible on your profile moving forward. Because at the end of the day, we're going to post some things that we probably shouldn't post sometimes and not think about it. But when you look at it a year from now or a few months from now, you might have a different perspective and go, "Oh, I probably shouldn't have posted that." So the on this day feature is a really great way to kind of monitor your profile and keep it a little cleaner, particularly if you're a business owner where it could influence your sales.
And how do you keep up with that like 365 days a year like mindset of like maybe looking at your Facebook memories and oh, okay, maybe I should not have posted that a year ago.
Yeah, so Facebook sends a notification every day, kind of highlighting the on the day memories. Um, so that's kind of my reminder. And then it probably is a little easier for me because social media is my job and I'm in social media all the time. So when I see that notification, I can dive right in and just take a look. But after you do it for a few days and then a couple of weeks, it just kind of becomes habit that you wake up in the morning, you see that notification, scroll through it really quickly, maybe delete one or two things if you need to, and then call it good. It just the more you do it, the more routine it becomes, and you don't even think about it. After a while, it just becomes part of your routine.
And is that like a, I guess maybe a routine you try to stick to every day, like, or are there like maybe some off days in there?
Yeah, there's always gonna be some off days. Um, if I'm really scrunched back to back with meetings, I may not always be able to check it that day. Um, but that's why I kind of do it continuously too, and not just for that first year, so that if there was a day that I missed, it'll pop up next time. Or if there was something I posted after that, then I can check and make sure that there's nothing going on there too. Um, so it's just kind of a good habit to get into to make sure that it's always staying fresh and as positive as possible.
And what is your favorite productivity hack for being an entrepreneur?
Hmm. I would say probably project management software. That wasn't something that we used in the beginning. So I was a very big kind of write everything down in notepads, flip between pages kind of person. Then we kind of experimented with spreadsheets and some earlier versions of project management, if you will. But that project management software has been crucial to not only the success of my business, but also my ability to have discipline and processes in place. I can set reminders for myself. I can see all of the projects that we're working on at one time and prioritize what needs to be done first and what can wait until Monday, like today, for instance. Um, and so implementing that project management software has probably been one of the best things that we could have done.
And what's more to go? I said it. What is one piece of advice you'd go back and give your 18-year-old self?
The advice I would give my 18-year-old self is probably that patience pays off, and just because it's not happening in your time doesn't mean it won't happen and that you should give up. Um, yeah, and it just keep striving because every step is a step towards your goal. Um, and of course, I felt like it should only be 6 steps at the time, and it was substantially more than that. But that patience does pay off, and that things will work out in the end.
And how do you like, I guess, keep yourself patient? Because I know, like, at least also for like myself, sometimes trying to keep that patience and not frustrate is sometimes really hard. Like, what are some things you either do, like, if you notice you start getting frustrated at something, like overwhelmed, or just like, how do you keep yourself patient?
Yeah, so it's definitely not been an easy challenge for myself either. But one of the ways that I've kind of found helpful, if you will, is I have a goal, but it seems like it's taking forever to reach to it. Um, and what I'll do is take that goal and break it down into 6 or 8 different sub goals. Because I'm a very big checklister kind of person. I love to check things off or scratch things off. That's very satisfying and gratifying for me. And so if I feel like I'm not reaching that goal quick enough, number one, there's probably some things I need to do in between there that I'm not doing. Um, but number two, I can get that gratification of having met 5 to 8 other goals, even if I haven't met that one yet. And by meeting some of those smaller goals, it helps me have a little more patience in meeting that main big goal that I had.
And are you someone that likes to, like, I guess, kind of like plan out maybe like your day, or just like, I mean, kind of like in a business sense, like, okay, I got a meeting at like 8 a.m. and then I got this at like 10 a.m.
Yeah, so I used to try to plan out almost every second of my day. And I quickly learned that as a self-employee, there's just so much that can happen within the day or even the week that it's just impossible to plan that meticulously. So what I do now is kind of take a look at what meetings I have for the day when I first get started, and then just pick my top 3 priorities for that day and say, "Okay, these are the 3 most important things that I need to work on today," and move forward with those 3.
And like, how do you choose, I guess, what's like the most important for the day?
So sometimes it could be, of course, deadline if the deadline is approaching. But sometimes it's more of kind of a mental thing too. If there's something that's not due for a week, but I've been frustrated about it or putting it off for a week, then sometimes I'll just make that a priority for the next day or two and force myself to kind of work on what I've been putting off. And so sometimes my level of frustration or patience, if you will, can guide those priorities as well.
And like, how do you, I guess, kind of determine like that level of frustration for like one project versus a different project?
So I kind of have a highlighter system within kind of our project management. Yellow kind of means that it's getting far off or getting closer to the deadline. Orange is behind, and basically it usually gets behind when I've become frustrated or am just kind of putting it off and not wanting to deal with whatever the process or design thing is that I'm having to do. And so I kind of use that color coded system along with those due dates to decide, okay, this is really coming up within the next couple of days. I need to do this, or this was started back on this date and we've made this much progress. We need more progress here. You're putting it off, and this is something that needs to be a priority. And kind of setting that start date is another important one because that not only lets me know how long it's been since we started working on it, but also kind of gauge our progress of how far along we are and be able to see that, okay, we should be farther along on this after 3 or 4 days kind of thing.
And is there like a certain type of project that maybe frustrates you more than others? Like maybe like a social media one versus like say like marketing or something?
So, ironically, it's usually something that really doesn't take all that long. It could take like an hour maybe, but it's all of the extra steps and processes, having to log into multiple software, change things here, and then wait on it to update here that I'm just like, "Okay, I'm not gonna worry about that right now. We'll get to that tomorrow." And before you know it, tomorrow is a week from now or 2 weeks from now, and it's like, "Okay, you've gotta just do it. It's not gonna take that long if you just do it." But now you've put it off for 2 weeks, and it's piling up.
And what do you think like a good company culture is?
So I'm really big on positivity, both kind of within our culture, but also within my company. Um, and I hope that I exude that a little bit even in kind of the just talking about how I run my business, and I don't see failures as failures, I see them as lessons, and I take that same mentality into everything that we do. Um, and so not just remaining positive about it, but also explaining to clients. One of the things I pride myself is being able to kind of explain what we do and some of our services and processes to clients in kind of layman's terms or English, if you will. Um, because I think digital marketing can be a really confusing area, and being able to explain that and just the work and the processes that go into that has helped clients not only understand the value of what we do, but also understand why it may take longer sometimes as well.
Alright, I think I got two more questions for you. First
Oh,
one, if you had the attention of the whole world for 5 minutes, what would you say?
ooh. I would probably keep it simple and just say, let's be kinder to each other. Social media has really made it easy to to not only share anonymously, but negatively and anonymously, and also give a megaphone to a really small group of people. And so while it's been really beneficial and it helps a lot of the clients that we work with grow and create a living for themselves, there's also a level of toxicity there that has grown significantly, particularly in the last couple of years. Um, And I would just say take a few minutes to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and think about what they're going through. Because a lot of times it can take 2 seconds to just think a little bit more about what somebody else might be going through to change your perception of things. Um, I mean, there were people that talked about how horrible my head looked bald when I would go into Home Depot or something. I mean, just random strangers like that, but have no idea what I was going through at the time. And I know that's true of many people that we pass or walk past every day. And so I would really encourage them in the world, if you will, to just be kinder and think about what other people are going through, or even take a moment to get to know what they're going through.
Now, the last question for you is how can listeners support you and your work?
Yeah, so they can find our business online at www.savagecreative.solutions. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And then they can also find out more about kind of my personal brand side of things at www.paulsavagejr and juniorsjr.com.
All right. And that is all the questions I have for you today. Thank you for being on today. And
Yes, thank
actually being one of the only people who in the last few weeks has actually shown up.
Hey, I get it.
And thank you guys for listening. Yeah, I'm gonna end that here, but